Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Good enough intro. Good enough intro. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? How many people in the room are the work at a startup or a founder of a startup? How many people work at a big dumb company? Raise your hand. Okay, great. So David and I have known each other for a decade or more. I don't know.
Long time.
You've been in the technology business for a long time. Obviously worked at AOL, Time Warner, or Time Warner, AOL, and Samsung, among other places. And just getting right to it with Samsung, obviously it's a huge company. You guys have a huge presence now in the Valley and a big presence in terms of interacting with startups. But I just want to get out there early. What exactly is this huge Korean company doing in Silicon Valley? Because you hear about these big companies, they're interested in startups, but how does that actually manifest itself?
So good question. We purposely did not rehearse, so it'd be fresh on stage, so hopefully it'll work. The thing about Samsung is that we've been in the Valley for something like 30 years. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
We have something like 33 R&D centers around the world. Some people have heard about this, but the company last year invested something like $14 billion in R&D. And we have about a quarter of our workforce, 67,000 people working on R&D projects. So there have been Samsung folks in the Valley for a while. And historically, we've been focused on hardware, right? No secret. But as you think about the future and you think about trying to create the best experiences possible, you have to have not just hardware and software, but what I always call a thoughtful integration. So what that means for us here in the Valley is trying to cover the entire spectrum of innovation and software, as we all know, at least historically, the innovation has tended to come when small groups of people, i.e. startups, get together without the legacy baggage or even momentum of success to really think about breakthrough ideas. So more recently, we've been doubling down in the Valley, and I'm running a group here that invests in startups. We partner with startups and help startups navigate a relatively large company. We're 285,000 people. We have an acquisitions group that we just formed, and we acquired a company based in New York called Boxy that some of you may have heard of.
Yeah.
And then we've set up Accelerators in Palo Alto and New York. Where
Why did you buy Boxy?
Why do we buy Boxy? Pretty simple. I've known Avner for a while, who's the CEO and founder, for a long time. But if you take a step back and look at our TV business, it's a pretty successful business. This is the 8th year we'll be #1 in TV. We sell 2 TVs a second, roughly, so you can do the math on it's a lot of displays out there. And what's been happening over time is that these aren't just displays giving you linear video, right? They're not just TVs, but they're connected devices. And as you think about the number of TVs that are going to become more connected to the internet and to each other, it really puts more of an opportunity and, frankly, responsibility on really thinking about what that entire software experience is. What's the UX? What's the experience? How do you match linear and linear video viewing, on-demand video, different applications and services, all on a so-called TV? And when you look around, we certainly have people talented inside the company, but if you want to accelerate what you do in product development, you absolutely have to look around. And in this case, there was a startup, and they've been doing this for years, really trying to redefine what the television or the video experience could be. And we thought, wow, let's have them join the team. And
well, I have to say, I mean, I had the first I'm a huge fan, as you know, of the TVs, and I had the first Samsung one with the Yahoo integration, which was terrible. And like it was pulling in the stock quotes and stuff like that, but it was just bad UI or whatever. And then every year we refresh in the conference rooms and inside, the TVs, or every 2 years. Yeah. And now I see people in the company going to the Smart Hub, right, and it's like 20 times better than it was. And you have BBC and CNN and all kinds of, and Hulu built in, Netflix built in, so you don't actually, if you buy a TV today, need to buy an Apple TV or even a Boxy or any of these other products anymore. It's kind of baked into the TV, yes?
Yeah. So, I mean, what people don't realize, and maybe some of you realize this, but one of the most powerful PCs you actually have in your home is your TV, especially if you have a Samsung TV. Yeah. And a lot of people still use it as a sexy but essentially a dumb device.
Right.
and they connect a bunch of other stuff to it to make it smarter. But it has, today when you take it out of the box, you can register and connect it to Wi-Fi right away. And what we've been pushing, and to answer your original question, what the Boxy team is helping us think about is how do you program that experience, right? Not just program the programming, but the experience overall. When you come to watch so-called TV, and you have basically everything on the web, essentially, because you have a browser, you have applications and services, as well as video choices. What does that look like? What should that look like? How do you personalize it? What's the relationship between a TV and your mobile device? And so these are all unanswered questions. We're trying to take our own cut at it, but bringing in a startup a group of entrepreneurs like a Boxy has absolutely helped us accelerate.
Like different than before you got there? Yeah. Obviously, you were at Time Warner when they started buying up startups, including mine. It was pretty normal for AOL to buy startups and say, hey, maybe we're not as good as making this internally. These folks have figured it out. They're a year or 2 years ahead. Let's just buy them and accelerate our progress into a vertical, whether it's blogs or anything. Mobile. Is that something Samsung had to get used to, and did you have a hard time getting the folks in Korea to realize, like, hey, there's all these smart startups out there, we need to interact with them? Because it seems to me like the big Sonys, the Samsungs, some of the big electronics manufacturers, they wouldn't even know how to work with the startups, It seems like a major change. Is that why they brought you there, was to try to sort of be a bridge to that?
I think partially, but there are a lot of people who've been doing this before I got there, for sure. Yeah. And I think Samsung's recognized the importance of partnering with startups, and hopefully, in your opinion, getting better and better about it. But the idea of tying early-stage investments and actually making acquisitions and putting that in one place, I think, was a newer idea, which is what my group's doing. And you mentioned weblogs. There are probably two seminal moments in my sort of digital life where I saw the power of what an acquisition could do. One was how weblogs absolutely transformed the approach that AOL took to content. Right? And then when I was at Google, one of the teams that I'd been working closely with was the content partnerships team for Google Video at the time. Right. And we saw this little startup come out of nowhere called YouTube. Right. And we tried to compete against them, and they just basically out-innovated and beat us. And we ended up acquiring them in what, at the time, was a controversial acquisition. It was a $1.7 billion acquisition after 18 months of being founded. Right. And
a huge lawsuits. That was a highly risky acquisition.
And a month or so after we acquired it, there was a $1 billion lawsuit that came as a parting gift. And but as it happened, the talent was amazing. I think, to Google's credit and folks there, they really nurtured and allowed YouTube to thrive and find its own way. And now, of course, it's absolutely been game-changing.
And let's talk about the investing in startups. Has that started occurring yet? And there's something about University Boulevard. There's a building there. That's a Samsung building. People know about that yet? Where are you at with that? And I hope I didn't just leak something.
Yeah, so Samsung has actually had a ventures group that's existed for a while, and they still exist, and that's a separate group from my group. So we're the Open Innovation Center. We work closely with them, but we have a venture group that focuses on early-stage software. That's it. So from seed to Series B would be our sweet spot. What you're referring to in Palo Alto is an accelerator where we are incubating our own startups. So we have a venture group, we have a partnerships group, we have an acquisitions group, but we have a separate space in Palo Alto and one in New York where we're effectively going to entrepreneurs and saying, we want to give you the best of both worlds. We want to enable you to focus exclusively on building products, and we'll give you access to the scale and resources of Samsung. So all the things that take up your, clog up your calendar, which you may not enjoy as much as developing products, we'll take care of it. And it's an experiment on our part, and we've got a handful of startups going, but what we want to do is give people access to our product roadmaps, give people access to our decision makers, give people access to our distribution.
So if I join that accelerator, and I know you guys have the watch, maybe I get to see version 2 of the watch, or if you guys were going to do glasses, or who knows what wearables, I might get a peek down the roadmap?
Absolutely. And in fact, to be honest, if you're a prospective partner of us, you'd get a peek as well. I mean, part of what we're trying to do better, frankly, is to give our partners and those with whom we work a leg up, right? Yeah. Because it's hard enough being on the outside. I mean, look, over the years, it's easier to create a startup, as you know.
Sure.
But as a result, it's harder to get attention. It's harder to get traction on some level, right? So we feel like, we've got, I think, a lot to offer, but a lot to gain from working with people who have complementary skills and products. How can we sort of make a 1 + 1 = 3?
The big concern entrepreneurs have working with big companies is, hey, especially in the early stages, what's to prevent them from stealing our content? So when I heard Facebook was going to partner with an accelerator, I immediately said hey, that's a bad idea, because if you look at Facebook's track record, they just copied Flipboard, they copied Quora, they did a poke of Snapchat, and they just relentlessly photocopy founders' innovations and kind of put it in their face. Should people be worried about that with a Samsung, and if not, why?
Well, I think generally speaking, you don't want to be naive about anyone, right? And I think that's what you're pointing to. But I don't think any company could get away with doing anything that isn't completely supportive of entrepreneurs for very long. And I think our intent is really to try to forge as strong a relationship as possible with startups. But also at the end of the day, and I think you know this as well as anyone, but back from my VC days, it's not just the idea. We know this, right? It's not just having the cool, creative, unique idea, but it's the execution at the end of the day. And so it's your ability and your confidence in your team's ability to get stuff done. And so I think that if you feel good and comfortable about that, then you should feel not overly concerned about someone copying the idea. And this is why, you don't sign an NDA when you go see a top VC, and vice versa, because it's really about how you're going to execute.
Let's talk about Android. You guys have a lot of Android devices. You guys have another operating system maybe you're working on. What's the relationship like with Google, just broad strokes? Because Google kind of sold the world on Android being this great, open, beautiful operating system to compete with, oh my God, the terrible Microsoft and Apple closed ecosystems. And then all we hear about now is how Google is locking down Android and making it a closed operating system now. Do you guys feel duped by them?
Well...
Not to put you on the spot, but I do...
That's a very melodramatic word, Jason.
I mean, it kind of is a bait and switch. I mean, let's be honest. I think a lot of people who are handset manufacturers feel that way. I know you don't speak for the handset manufacturing units, but what's the relationship like with Google, and how do you look at the operating system known as Android?
We have a super great working relationship with Google, and I know a lot of people want to inject, drama into our relationship. But the reality is Android been very, very good for us, and we've been good for Android, right? And so I think rational people will say, how can we work closer together? And we have this cross-licensing deal that you may have heard about, where we're going to share patents, not just now, but for the next 10 years. And so, things like that are acknowledgement of Samsung and Google saying, let's not let the specter of potential litigation get in the way of innovation, right?
Right.
That said, I think what you're referring to is historically, we've always been a company that's recognized and focused that there's a lot of different types of users out there, and a lot of people who have different preferences. So whether it's a form factor or OS or the types of applications they want to run, different strokes for different folks. So we have and will continue to create mobile devices on Windows. And 2 years ago, we announced the launch of a new open mobile OS called Tizen with Intel. And it's based on web standards and HTML5, and it's something that we're also committed to. So again, we will create lots of different types of devices on lots of different types of platforms, but we're very much committed to Android.
Tizen is something that is going to be directed more towards wearables, maybe, or is it something where we're going to actually see more phones coming out? Because this is a project that's been brewing for a little while. People seem to think 2014 is the year we'll actually see handsets with them. Is this the year we see some handsets and devices?
Yeah, so we've announced that you will see Tizen handsets, not in the U.S., but in other markets. I think the way we think about Tizen is the way you should think about any new platform, and that's to think about it as an ecosystem. And so for us, as coming at it from a hardware angle, for Android, for Windows, and for Tizen, we think about lots of different types of devices that are connected to each other and create a seamless experience for users. Not unlike the way this wearable, for example, connects to my mobile device.
Yeah. Let's talk about that wearable. You guys got the watch out there first, or Pebble first, but you guys with a sort of more fuller version with the screen on it. Did it come out too early? What did you guys learn from it? I mean, it hasn't gotten mass adoption, but it certainly has captured people's imagination. Battery life is a real challenge on wearables. What do you think of your 1.0? How would you rate yourselves, and what will we see in 2.0?
I don't think it came out too early at all. I think it did exactly what we wanted it to do. We shipped nearly 1 million units of this. 800,000, I think, was the official number. But for us, it was a way to take what is. I'm making a lot of noise here. Yeah. But a mobile phone is fantastic, but it's, for the most part, I mean, it is in a way a wearable almost, right? Yeah. Because if it isn't on you, it's at least a few feet from you 24/7, even when you sleep. I think people appreciate it. But it's an immersive experience, right? Like you dive into it. Along with this are going to be devices where you glance. And there are going to be different things that a device that you glance at does that are different from an immersive device. And in this world, there will also be wearables that you don't even glance at, that'll just be on your person doing either documenting or recording or providing or collecting information and data and sending it to someplace else for analysis. So, in our minds, wearables are one part of a larger ecosystem of devices, and that's what we are building. We've learned a ton, not just about the components that go into a wearable, but how you create and start to shape different types of experiences, right? So, for example, I may love to take photos. I may love to get notifications. I may even love to get headlines on a wearable, but I may not want to read War and Peace on a wearable. Yeah. It may be more appropriate for something like this. That seems obvious, but I'm being purposely extreme. But there are lots of nuances that we are picking up and sharing with our developer partners, and that they're sharing with us as they try to develop an experience for this. And I think we know we're going to be in a much better place when, if you think about when tablets first came out, people basically kind of cut down experiences or apps from a PC or their mobile devices and literally put it on a tablet, and it was like as big as your actual mobile service. And so it wasn't created natively for the device or the form factor at hand. And I think we're now evolving to a point where developers are thinking, tell us more about this particular wearable and let us customize from the ground up an experience. And I think when that starts to happen, we're going to have some spectacular experiences for people.
What are the apps that you use regularly, that you see in the last year in your position, that just impress you the most? That you say, wow, this company, this app is super important, for the mobile platform, for the wearable platform.
Right.
I know you're an avid Path user, as an example.
Yeah, so I use Path a lot.
What do you love about that? And you were on, people don't know this probably, but you were on the flight that landed in San Francisco that crashed.
Apparently I was.
Do you mind talking about that? Is it too traumatic?
No. How can I say no now that you've asked me in front of a couple hundred people?
Yeah, well, you might have PTSD and you...
No, just not really.
I don't want you to have a panic attack up here, but Jesus, I don't know. Has anybody else here ever been in a plane crash on a major airline? Raise your hand if you have a bona fide crash. No. Does anybody know anybody who's been in a bona fide plane crash with a large plane, like one person, two people? So, you're the only person we know who's been through this. What the hell was that like?
This is going in a direction I wasn't anticipating. But
tell me the moment when you knew there was a problem.
When we hit the runway, started skidding, and almost flipped over, I pretty much knew that was not normal.
So it wasn't like on the approach, you felt like, something's wrong with this approach? Like there wasn't like a dive or a dip or a left or a right?
No, it was a perfectly regular flight on a beautiful sunny day, and then it was just the landing part that was...
It just felt hard?
It was, it was the whole tail broke off, and people flew out in the back. So it was not a smooth landing.
Yeah. Wow. And I know this because you walked out.
What I'm interested to see is how he's going to connect this back to
No,
the
I mean, I just, it's like one of these things where, as an interviewer, I asked you about Path, and then I remember you shared the photo.
Yeah.
You shared a photo of the plane, like, OMG, my plane crashed. It was like this incredible social media app moment for me. And I was like, are you okay? And I saw the outpouring on Path of people like concerned about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So maybe the lesson there is that, I mean, what I did is I used Path, and I have my Path connected to Twitter and Facebook and vice versa, right? But obviously in a little bit of shock, I wasn't thinking straight. But I knew a lot of people knew I was going to be on that flight, and so you can make some quick calls to your loved ones. But for everyone else, I thought the most immediate way of telling those folks that I was okay was to use my social network. And what I didn't count on was people scraping my Twitter photos or whatever and seeing myself on CNN. I mean, that was never the intention.
Yeah. So what else on your phone?
What
other apps?
So there's things that you like to do, whether it's checking in or capturing things of the now that are great for a wearable or a phone. But what's really I found convenient is notifications. I was at breakfast today with a former colleague, and the phone rang, and I just looked in, and I basically didn't take the call, and I sent an SMS back to the person, said I was busy, but I didn't have to pull my phone out and do this. And for me, that was kind of cool. But we're just begun to scratch the surface, because I think folks like you all may be developing different types of apps for wearables or not, and are thinking about it. But it's when people really start diving into it, and when we have the sparks flying, that I think we'll see experiences we didn't expect. And we're beginning to answer your question. We're beginning to see some really cool extensions of apps in the connected health space, particularly in fitness and wellness, because you have this on your person at all times, right? And so there's very few things that can, given what these are capable of doing that. And
in this version, it has a pedometer and accelerometer in the watch, correct, but not a heart rate monitor yet.
Yet, that's right. And even for this, this has 9 sensors in it. A lot of people don't know that. So even for a standard, mobile device, I don't think we've actually begun to scratch the surface on the kind of experiences people can make that take advantage of all the things that have already been built in and are available. So that's why I'm pretty passionate about what we do, because we really want to reach out to startups and say, hey, how can we do some really cool stuff together? Because I mean, it's pretty good so far, but we haven't really begun.
Should device makers, you talked about this sort of smoothing of the ecosystem and the experience from hardware to operating system and apps. Do you think the handset manufacturers and the operating system makers need to own the application level or have a core functionality in the app level of excellence in order to compete with, say, Apple or even now Google? The top 20 apps on iOS, like a half dozen of them are Google apps now, Gmail, Maps, etc. Do you see yourself having a full complement of apps, and how do you get there? Do you have to buy the top 10 app companies eventually?
And by the way, I've seen your theory on what various companies could do to buy top apps and services in various categories, which is pretty interesting. But I think we still have to figure out how everything evolves. What I would say is that you have, in the case of Android, a very good, solid partner in Google, and they have great services, and we've always featured them, obviously. But there's this huge world, and we know this, right, of different apps companies and services companies. The question is, are there opportunities to do more than float at the app layer, and get down closer and deeper to the OS, and to be able to harness more information and data, whether it's sensor information or usage on other apps and that sort of thing. And so I think that's one of the questions. And
well, I mean, you guys, it was pretty obvious that the perfect purchase for you guys would have been Waze. You must have looked at that. You guys didn't wind up buying Waze. Google did. Why didn't you buy Waze? That seemed like a perfect thing for Samsung to own. I
love Waze. I think it's a great company. GNOME is is a really great guy, fantastic entrepreneur. We had all sorts of different conversations with them, but
didn't get there.
I guess this is my way of saying no comment.
No comment, right. But you are interested in that app layer. I mean, if you are getting very interested. So I think the strategy that we'll see from Samsung in the future is as you build out these devices, you're going to start buying these app companies and then letting them run on their own. That's my prediction. What do you think of my prediction?
I think that we're definitely going to become much more active and aggressive about making acquisitions. I think that we recognize that there are just a completely different class of services or category of services, I should say, that haven't been created, even for standard, flagship mobile devices, but wearables and et cetera. And I think we'll invest in them. I think we'll partner with them. But I think one of the things we're realizing now is acquiring startups is a fantastic way to accelerate your own product development, period. And even though we have nearly 70,000 people working on R&D, very smart folks, very hardworking folks, we know that the best companies in the world, and whether it's a Google or an Apple or an Amazon or Facebook, they're also making great acquisitions as well. And so I think it's just the price of admission to be competitive. And I think for that reason, for those of you who have startups and are in this space now, there's never been a more challenging time in certain respects, but there's never been a more exciting, interesting time, right? Because everyone understands the importance of working with you and potentially acquiring you as well.
Awesome.
And we don't think any differently.
All right, let me take one question from the audience. Who's got a great, concise question for either of us, but hopefully for David? Do you have a question? There we go. Wait for the microphone.
With 3D printing technologies, where do you see the future with wearables as well as the connected device world?
I didn't hear the first part of the question.
With 3D printing?
3D printing.
Yep.
Where do you see it?
Where do you see the future going with wearables and the connected device world?
Yeah, any thoughts on 3D printing? I mean, that's like one of these spaces we hear so much about. We see an acquisition there. How does Samsung look at something like that?
I think we're really open to seeing the different types of ideas and products people have. Without getting into too much detail, I would tell you that, in fact, one of the startups that we have in our Palo Alto accelerator is really thinking about an Internet of Things world where they have certain devices that they're literally making in their own 3D printer to just get things going and prototypes working. And so for me, what I've seen is the unbelievable impact that 3D printing can have in accelerating your own prototype development and really testing out what will happen in reality if certain things, so it's going from paper to actual prototypes so much faster. And it's exactly, facilitating product development in ways that I wouldn't have imagined. So that's one way, but it's hard for me to comment on what we'll see because, again, it's 3D printers are just an enabler, right, of different products and things that come out. And so I think it's like
I find 3D printers are like quadcopters. It's just they're so fucking cool, and then you get one, and then you use it, and except for these very specific things like quadcopters, it's like security or filming, action scenes in movies or whatever, and 3D printers is prototyping. It doesn't feel like there's like a mass application yet.
Well, so 3D printers, I mean, in my mind, they're not the end product. They're an enabler for other end products, right? And so that's why it's sort of the means to some other ends. And I guess it remains to be seen what those other products are going to be.
Well, I have to say, I love the Samsung quadcopter. I've got 10 of those. They fly around the house, and they're awesome.
He's joking. We make a lot of things.
They don't make quadcopters yet. All right, listen, you've been a great guest. You've been super honest, and I appreciate you just investing in the startup community, honestly. We've known each other a long time, but I told you when you took the gig over there, I think it's absolutely fantastic that Samsung is going all the way down to the nascent level and supporting founders, investing, buying companies. It's really smart, and it's great to have another player in the marketplace. Let's hear it for David, who's been a great guest.